I'm Brittany, this is Wei Yang, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. Today, we are continuing through Volume 4 of Erha. We left off at a cliffhanger of sorts. It could be quantified as such. And we get to find out exactly what happens. Like, if, say, Chuaning, I don't know, turns around, faces a wall, any kind of last-ditch effort, probably, maybe. Who could say? We're on page 245 for chapter 142, which is, once again, called Shizun. This is cruel and unusual. The degree to which Meat Bun knows what she's doing about these chapter titles is ridiculous. We're going through, I believe, to 142, 144. I think we're going through chapter 144 of 145. You can check the description of this stream, and it will tell you. And while I was looking for the stopping place for today's stream, I just so happened to skim past a title, and I did not read what it was. All I did was see that it's a novel. There is a title in here that is like a paragraph, and that's terrifying. And we should be getting to that one today. So whatever the hell that means, we get to find out. But for now, in the split second before Mo Run looked over, inspiration had struck Chu Wan-ning. He had spun around at the last possible moment, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and leaving Mo Run a plain view of the lean, well-proportioned muscles of his back and other parts. This way, Mo Run wouldn't be able to see his front. Yeah, but now you have turned around and presented your ass to the top. Is that what's cruel and unusual? Chu Wan-ning thought he was being awfully clever, but the dummy didn't realize he'd only exposed to Mo Run the sensual dimples low on his back, his full and firm buttocks, and his slender and powerful legs. He was like a rabbit who'd peeled off its own pelt and climbed over the fire to grill itself to a delectable crisp. He was practically saying, "Please enjoy. Thanks." It's too early for this. It's way too early. That was the second paragraph of today. Mo Run felt his throat go dry. His eyes reddened, and he had to steady himself for a moment before he could speak. Shizun, what are you doing? What was he doing? His position was certainly a little strange. What could he say to smooth this over without arousing suspicion or anything else further than it already is? Chu Wan-ning glanced over his shoulder, his expression cold and solemn as he racked his brain. Mo Run had already set his clothes down and was walking toward him. Perhaps it was because his back was to the light. Chu Wan-ning thought the expression on Mo Run's face was frightening, like a wolf in the wild that had been starved for too long, and was looking at a fresh, tender piece of meat. But the meat was hung over the jaws of a trap, and thus the wolf hesitated. His hunger and reason waged a fierce battle, the flames of it spreading to his eyes. Those dark eyes were terribly bright, lit with a haunting radiance. Finally realizing that something was not quite right, Chu Wan-ning knocked three sharp words on a bow and pierced through this particular atmosphere with one sentence: "Scrub my back." I feel like that's not the solution he's looking for. That is more a delaying the inevitable. Huh? It took Mo Run a moment to respond, and when he did, it was as if the moisture in his breath had frozen in his throat. He sounded a little husky and rather sensual. What? At the end of his wits, Chu Wan-ning had come up with a random excuse in his panic, but since he'd said it, he might as well commit. He faked calm and stonily said, "Since you're here, scrub my back before you go." There was no reply from Mo Run. I've been sweating from all the work we've done these last few days. It's uncomfortable. Chu Wanning threw everything he had into appearing nonchalant and unconcerned. It'd be nice to be scrubbed clean. He couldn't tell if Mo Run was buying it, if his lies were convincing. Either way, Mo Run obediently did as he was told. He brought over a towel, soaked it in warm water, and began to scrub Chu Wanning's back. That's going to have the opposite effect on the whole reason he turned around in the first place. Yu Hong of the Night Sky had always been wise. This had to be the stupidest thing he'd ever done. What was the most excruciating torture in the world? It was to have the person he loved standing right behind him, those large hands dragging across his body, separated by a single coarse washcloth, each stroke skimming over a thin layer of water to leave a trail of heated, reddened skin in its wake. Even with Mo Run holding his strength in check, the firmness of his strokes, along with the fact that Chu Wanning's body had never before been caressed like this, made every fiber of his muscles tremble. It was all he could do to keep his entire body still, barely managing to conceal his unusual state from the man behind him. He pressed his forehead against the wall and bit down hard on his lip where Mo Run couldn't see, the rims of his phoenix eyes red and his desire so unbearably hot and hard. That was not my addition. That's in the text. I'm only reading. That moisture collected there as dew gathered upon a branch. Man is pre-ing just from being you know, that actually checks out. As a virgin, that checks out. That entirely checks out. That is real. That gets the seal of reality stamped firmly on it. Thank you very much. He had no sexual experience whatsoever. How could he possibly stand before the one he loved and pretend to be virtuous and dignified while enduring this kind of stimulation? It was excruciating. Now, if you asked Mo Run what the most agonizing torture in the world would be to him, his answer would probably be somewhat different. It was to have a certain man standing naked in front of him, hands braced against the wall, smooth planes of his shoulders and back spread before him, wholly unsuspecting as he offered up his body to Mo Run and his filthy thoughts, letting him rub his fevered hands all over that body with only that vexatious washcloth in the way. Mo Run knew he was just scrubbing his Shizun's back for him. But if he were to apply even a touch more force, this man's skin would bloom red, looking bullied, abused, erotic. That is some of the most offensive in a complimentary fashion word choice that I have ever heard. I cannot believe she just said that to me. Mo Run's hands pressed over Chu Wanning's shoulder blades and slid down the small of his back. As his dawdling hands came to the sides of Chu Wanning's waist, their strokes unconsciously grew more vigorous. He thought he felt the person beneath him tremble, but he was probably just imagining it. No, Shizun's shaking like a leaf at the moment. His eyes, fixed on those fair, plump curves, grew bloodshot with the effort it took to stop himself from tossing the washcloth aside and reaching out to grab and squeeze with bare hands until he'd left marks in the form of 5 provocative red streaks. He had long since tasted the ambrosial nectar of the man before him. How could he be expected to stand before Chu Wanning and pretend to be honorable and gentlemanly while swallowing down his hunger? It was excruciating. I'm so done with her. Time stretched endlessly as the two stewed in their respective torments. If this scrubbing were to continue, the both of them just might catch fire. At last, Chu Wanning couldn't contain himself. Voice cracking, he said, "You can go. I can reach the rest of my back. I'll do it myself." Mo Run, forehead covered in a sheen of sweat, released the breath he'd been holding. His voice was low. Yes, Shizun. The curtains rustled. Mo Run was gone. A long moment passed as Chu Wanning leaned against the wall, forehead pressed to the cool surface, unable to pull himself together. The tips of his ears were blood red, mirroring the marks left in the wake of the scrubbing. He wondered whether Mo Run had noticed. He cracked open his phoenix eyes and bit his lower lip in humiliation. After hesitating at length, he reached down to touch himself where he was so hard it almost hurt. Excuse me? He'd run back to shower in an attempt to suppress these vulgar impulses. Who could have known the heavens had other plans, and circumstances would see him pushed even deeper beneath the waves of desire by Mo Run? Chu Wanning had ever relied on his purity-based cultivation to suppress his primal needs, but now he finally couldn't resist. Nobody fucking move. Nobody move. Everybody shut up. Everybody shut up. Hold my hand. Hold my hand. Hold my hand. We're all holding hands. All right? But now, he finally couldn't resist any longer and resorted to this base, humiliating method to relieve himself of the desire that threatened to spill out of him. His lips were slightly parted, his phoenix eyes half-lidded. His expression was somewhat pathetic, somewhat aggrieved. He pressed his burning forehead to the icy wall, delicate shoulders hunched, and the jut of his throat bobbed as he tried to suppress his low, choked gasps. So sinful, yet so beautiful. Like a white swallowtail butterfly snared in a spider's web, wings powerlessly quivering in tightly knit lust, never, never, never to escape. He'd finally been dirtied. Dirtied to the bone. Dirtied so wretchedly, so pitifully, that the filth was an allure unto itself, one that tempted others to violation, drew them into addiction. When it was over, Chu Wanning slammed his fist against the wall. That strike held so much viciousness, so much fury, so much resentment that it split the skin of his knuckles. Blood seeped out. Bastard. He didn't know if he was cursing himself or Mo Run. Chu Wanning's eyes were damp and vaguely dazed, filled both with tender affection and regretful self-loathing. That's a scene break. This is a rather stunning example when it comes to building unresolved sexual tension. This is a masterclass of, both for the reader and the characters, building it in such a devastating way, only to not get the first that you were hoping for, but still getting a first that you really wanted. It relieves some of the pressure so that we don't go insane. But at the same time, now we've just hiked up to another level of frenzy. And we're going to explode. But not quite yet. Because it's not the right time yet. A stunning, stunning example of how you do that. And that is very difficult to do. It's really difficult to build unresolved sexual tension in such an intense, deliberate, but still feels very natural and makes sense for the characters kind of way. This is a freakish example and should be studied. I will be studying it. It's me. I'm bitches. I'll be studying it. Thus time went on. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed since they'd arrived at Yuliang village. The busy harvest season was coming to an end. Since the day of the back scrub, a day that will live in infamy, Chu Wanning had avoided Mo Run as snakes and scorpions avoid ferocious beasts, not because he noticed anything unusual about Mo Run's behavior, but because he couldn't accept the change in himself. It was natural that someone who had remained pure and austere for so many years would grow accustomed to it. Why else would Chu Wanning be so scornful toward those who'd paired off to dual cultivate? It wasn't that he was jealous. The Yuheng elder truly found such acts unbearably distasteful, even sickening. He also didn't look at erotica because he really had no desire to. His avoidance wasn't put on for the sake of appearances. To Chu Wanning, liking someone or kissing them were things he could tolerate. Anything further, masturbation, for example, or intercourse, would make his face go blue. He couldn't take it. He was like someone who had been vegetarian his entire life. He might think a bit of lard smelled good if you snuck it into his bowl, but would probably die of disgust if you gave him a piece of seared meat still pink on the inside. She's really good with her analogies, and this is a particularly effective one that communicates the situation rather well. And also Liv, yes, very demisexual. Very, very demisexual of him. That day, after he'd gotten himself off in a confused flurry, Chu Wanning had sobered. He'd panted as he stared at the stickiness in his hand and felt as if a bucket of cold water had been upended on him. His face went pale. What was he doing? Was he so stirred up by a kid barely past 20 that he couldn't restrain himself, that he actually needed to touch himself to pacify the rolling tides in his heart? Gooseflesh had sprung up on Chu Wanning's back. From that moment on, he'd kept 3 feet away from Mo Run at all times, afraid he might accidentally unleash the raging beast in his heart and do something regrettable. As somebody married to a demisexual, I am married to a demisexual. Now that we've made the connection, cannot unsee. This is actually quite perfect. As he withdrew, so did Mo Run. When Mo Run reflected on what had happened, he too was terrified. He discovered that his yearning for Chu Wanning was much stronger than anticipated. The dam he'd erected could barely hold back the tempestuous currents, and the passion in his bones was going to overflow at any minute. He was keenly aware that one moment of weakness was all it took to go from man to beast. He didn't want to hurt Chu Wanning again, so he unconsciously avoided him. With the distance interposed between them, they almost seemed merely a respectful disciple and a benevolent master. In this way, the days passed peacefully without incident. One day, the village hunter caught a plump deer. The villagers proposed holding a bonfire in the evening at the small drying field near the entrance of the settlement. Every household contributed food, from pastries to dried meats, and the village chief opened 2 jars of Gaoliang liquor. The crowd sat together, jolly with anticipation. How merry it was to watch the dancing of the bonfire, to smell the aromatic grease of roasted venison, and eat and drink together. Chu Wanning and Mo Run sat apart. The two settled down with the bonfire between them, gazing at each other through the flames, each hoping the other wouldn't notice. One would sneak a discreet glance only to meet the eyes of the other and pretend it was a coincidence, dropping his gaze. After a few seconds, when the other was unguarded, that gaze would secretly fix upon the other's face once more. Orange light surged and firewood crackled. Laughter and cheer flowed and eddied around them, but they had neither eyes nor ears for any other. The moon in the sky seemed to shine for these 2 beating hearts alone. Everyone around that fire knows. These poor people had to sit around a fire all damn night watching these 2 idiots blatantly eye each other and play, eye-sex tag all night. These people, they know. They know. Worst kept secret on the peak. Worst kept. Everybody knows but them. And I love that trope, so. The jars of liquor the village chief had opened quickly emptied, but the party went on unabated. Mo Run, remembering that he still had a jar of the top-quality pear blossom white in his own residence, excused himself and rose to go grab it. He was halfway to his room when he heard a noise behind him. He turned. Who's there? The rustling of footsteps instantly paused. A pair of verdant green shoes embroidered with yellow flowers slowly shuffled from around the corner. Mo Run blinked. Oh, it's you, Miss Linger. Linger had drunk a little too much, and her snowy, jade-like cheeks were flushed red, her lips rich and bright. She stood under the moonlight, gazing at him with affection, her full bosom rising and falling with her quickened breasts. Breaths! That was a bit of a Freudian penis there, wasn't it? Like, I can even find my quickened breaths. Thank you. Mo Shinjun, she said, please wait. I have something I want to say to you. See, no, okay. I'm gonna defend quickened breasts here, all right? Because I now go into these streams having warmed up with a romance novel, with a straight romance novel from like 1987, like a good trashy romance novel. And there is indeed more than one emphasis on breasts there, okay? So it was not exactly outside the realm of possibility for me. Oh God, that's the end of the chapter. And now is the title that is like half a page. So hang on. The last line of that chapter once again was Mo Shinjun. She said, please wait. I have something I want to say to you. And that's the end of the chapter. So we're on page 253 for chapter 143, which is called Shizun is my unattainable first love, my erstwhile once lover, the object of my most sincere affection, the source of my most torturous affection, and has been all along. This girl is about to get friend-zoned so hard that the title has already done the job. Oh my God. No matter how slow Mo Run might be, there was no way to misunderstand her burning gaze. It wasn't like he was dumb. Hastily, he said, Miss Linger, you've had too much. Let's talk about this tomorrow. I want to talk now. This girl was ferocious when riled up. Strands of her hair were loose and her eyes were bright. Mo Run eyed her warily. He didn't want to be delayed here and was about to resort to Qinggong to make a quick escape when she latched onto his sleeve. Mo Run was both amused and annoyed. Let go of me. No. It was said that booze gives confidence. Linger was bold to begin with, and she'd been wanting to cozy up to this Xianjun from Xisheng Peak for a while now. Without further preamble, she proclaimed loudly, I like you! Do you like me? Stunned, Mo Run had no reply. Unless you count the chapter title. Linger became instantly anxious at this lack of reaction. When Mo Run had first arrived in Yuliang village, she had thought him quite dashing and gallant. Later, she'd learned he was the very same Mo Zongsha, whose fame had been growing over the past few years, and her maidenly heart fell irrevocably deeper into infatuation. I feel like one of the straight girl rites of passage is, falling in love with a gay man. I feel. Kind of like it's the queer girl's rite of passage to fall in love with their best friend. It's the straight girl's rite of passage too. It's the falling in love with the unavailable, unattainable, right? That's actually kind of a little Venn diagram thing. There's a similar thing there in falling for the unattainable people that straight girls and queer girls have in common, actually. Hello? The busy harvest season would soon come to its end, and Mo Run would leave. Linger was just some girl from the lower cultivation realm. All she had going for her were her pretty face and good figure. She didn't know how Mo Run felt, but she did know that if she didn't confess her feelings now, she wouldn't get another chance. And so, bolstered by liquid courage, she had sought out Mo Run to corner him with her confession. Mo-Run was honestly a bit startled by her brazen fearlessness. Linger's charming face flushed bright red as she waited with bated breath. How wonderful it would be if Mo-Run said yes. Not only would she win herself a handsome young man as her lover, getting together with Mo-Run would also mean getting in with Sishong Peak. She wouldn't be stuck in this podunk village. She could live comfortably. She could... I'm sorry, Miss Linger, but you'd best let me go. His blunt reply tore down all those fanciful pavilions she'd been building in the sky. The blush on Linger's face had yet to recede as she blanched, and for a moment the color of her face looked terrible. After a strangled pause, she asked anxiously, Am I not pretty enough? Oh, honey. This poor drunk girl. Exactly. I feel bad for this girl. This is sad and relatable. You're very pretty. Mo-Run was unfailingly polite as he gently extricated himself from her grip. But not my type. Whatever dignity she'd had left was completely shredded by this not my type. That's actually, if you're going to let somebody down, it depends on the delivery. If you're just like, you're not my type, then rude, devastated. But like a gentle, like you're honestly just not my type. Like it's all in the delivery. It's all how it's said. It's just, you're just not, I'm just not. Like that's more like it really just kind of can't be helped. It's nobody's fault really. It's nothing wrong with you. It's just not, which is, since he was being unfailingly polite in that moment. But to a drunk girl's brain, who knows how she took it. Tears welled up in Linger's eyes, though the heartbreak was secondary. She did fancy Mo-Run, but it was mostly an infatuation. What she really yearned for was to rise above her circumstances, and it was the shattering of those beautiful dreams that she felt more keenly. Then she held back her tears and asked, What's your type? Oh, honey. You can totally go, be a gold digger as the era you live in, almost necessitates a lot of the time. You can still have those pavilions, babe. I'm rooting for her. I want Linger to get her pavilions. Her question left Mo-Run at a loss. What was his type? Out of sheer habit, he almost answered that his type was someone like Shi Mei, but before the words left his lips, he had a sudden feeling that no, that wasn't quite right. He was caught off guard, unable to answer. Well, what's your type? Linger pressed. Her lovely eyes were fixed unwaveringly on Mo-Run's face, alert to any minute changes in expression. Linger's situation was a sorry one as well. She had an older sister who'd married an ordinary fabric merchant from the upper cultivation realm and moved to Lezhou many years ago to live in luxury. Linger and her mother had once traveled to visit her older sister, bringing with them bundles of pepper-dried fish from their village. But her sister's husband disliked the pungent stench of dried fish and saw his in-laws as unsightly country bumpkins. Well, fuck this guy! They were an embarrassment to keep around, and he had chased them off only a few days into their stay. Oh, honey, you can gold dig better than your sister. Absolutely. The experience had cut deep into Linger's heart. Since that day, she'd been unsatisfied with her shabby life, swearing to win herself a life even better than her older sister's, and pay back the humiliation she'd suffered in full. She'd spent the past few years looking for a strapping young man to marry so she could change her fate, and she really didn't want to let Mo Wei-yu go. Emboldened by alcohol and reckless with desperation, she leaned into him unsteadily. Linger possessed a soft and sensual figure. When she walked across the paddy fields in the summer, the men would all steal glances. Now she was going all in, betting on her warm body to pry apart Mo Zongsho's armor. She pressed her pliant flesh against his. Am I not good enough? You didn't think it through. You didn't even consider before rejecting me like that. But this only made Mo-Run incredibly uncomfortable. He made to pull her off him, his face rapidly darkening. Miss Linger, I haven't known you for long at all. How could I like you? Why would I think of you that way? How would you know unless you tried? She drew near for another attempt. Mo-Run immediately exclaimed, Please stay back. You really don't like me at all? Linger's eyes widened and she repeated in disbelief, Not even a little? Just a little? I don't like you. Not even a little, Moran thought maybe he hadn't been clear. When it came to such things, a clean cut was best. So even though it was cruel, he added, I am not interested. Not even a little bit. I mean, especially to drunk brain. Drunk, infatuated girl brain, you gotta be a little more straightforward with. Linger was speechless. She could understand if she wasn't his type, but not interested? How many unmarried men could face a woman who possessed such a charming face and figure, one who threw herself willingly into his arms, yet say with such righteous conviction that he wasn't interested? How could he face enticement from such a beauty and feel not a shred of desire? Stunned, she stood rooted to the spot for a long interval. How are you... She struggled to say the words. She actually wanted to ask, how can you not feel any desire at all? That's not normal. Product of her environment. Moran could tell what she was thinking, but he didn't feel like explaining himself. They had met by chance. Even if all she wanted was a fling, he had no such intentions. She could think whatever she liked. Sorry, he said in a low voice. Then he slipped off into the night. The breeze blew into his face, and he couldn't help but squint. The conversation with Linger just now brought on a sudden realization. When it came to love, there was something he'd always been mistaken about. Linger had asked him, what's your type? This question was something he'd never given deep thought to before. Someone who rarely received warmth hadn't the privilege of choice. If someone treated him well, he would offer his all to them. Thank you. What's your type? This was something he'd unconsciously never dared ask himself. In this world, everyone had their own unique tastes and biases. When Moran was a child, he had often seen other children on the streets tugging at their parents' sleeves with words like, I like these, the ones with the scallions, or Mommy, this red lantern is prettier than the yellow one, I like red. But for him, saying something like that would have been pointless. He could only afford the cheapest plain flatbread, which he would split in half to share with his mother. Later, when he was at the pleasure house, he would sneak peeks at the rich young masters who came around. He would watch them fan themselves languidly and say, I liked the girl from last time, Erha. She's delicate and her voice is sweet. Let's have her sing for us today, too. And other such stuff. Honestly, to Moran, Erha... I've actually never seen this before. Erha Ziza? Or because it's not Zizi, is it? Erha Zizi? Or is it Ziza? It would have to be. I don't believe I've ever come across that before. Was nowhere near as pretty as Bayrong Ziza. Yeah, see? Ziza. Thank you. But who cared what he thought? Nobody ever asked him, what do you like? Whether it was who was prettier or any other choice, making it was the purview of the rich and powerful. Moran could only accept what others gave him. If there was food to eat, he should be thankful. If there were clothes to wear, he should weep in gratitude. What was this like? Unbearably accurate. You want to talk about a product of his environment? In fact, we probably already have. He'd be a raving lunatic to even consider it. How could he have any preference? How could he dare to have a preference? What right did he have? All he had was this lowly, worthless life, and even that was a struggle to keep. Whatever he got, he would tightly grip onto. He'd lived like this for so long it became more than habit. It was ingrained into his very bones. No matter what riches and treasure he amassed, no matter how many of the finest perfumes he luxuriated in, so much that it made him sneeze, he could never cover the stench of poverty emanating from his marrow. Also too real. I've probably also mentioned this before, but this is a very real thing. Poverty and living in situations of scarcity embeds that shit into your brain, especially when you live through it at such formative years. There's parts of that either never go away or only are lessened with a lot of therapy. So much therapy. But it's very real. It's sort of similar to the captivity mindset of long-held prisoners. Yeah, there's actually a bit of a Venn diagram there. Growing up in poverty, his own feelings and preferences were like dirt under the sole of a shoe, completely worthless. The question, what do you like, was something nobody would ever ask. Later, he would rise to the apex of society, becoming emperor of everything. But serving an emperor was like serving a tiger. Those around him could only try to guess at his thoughts and whims. What do you like became a phrase nobody would dare to ask. But Linger had asked. A few simple words, yet they had him stumped. He had once thought that to love someone was to respect and cherish them, to hold them in his cupped hands with greatest care, never daring to harbor even the slightest inappropriate thought toward them, which makes all the sense in the freaking world given, product of his environment. This was the way he treated Shi Mei. He thought this was love, and there didn't seem to be anything wrong with that. There isn't, to a point. But at this very moment, Mo Run was vaguely beginning to wonder if perhaps things weren't as he'd thought. Did he really prefer gentleness over stubbornness? Did he really like the sweet-tempered more than the firm and unyielding? Did he really like the tender affection of peach blossom eyes more than the sharp and piercing frost of phoenix eyes? Did he really like Shi Mei and not... He didn't dare invoke that person's name, but his heart began to race despite himself, his blood pumping hot and roiling in his veins. Mo Run was shocked by this burst of love and desire. Love and desire, two things never meant to be pulled apart, never meant to be separated. Well, to be attracted by another's appearance, bewitched by another's voice, another's scent, another's passing glances, wanting to conquer, wanting to possess, wanting to leave his own scent on unspoiled flesh that had yet no connection to him, wanting to drive his burning passion into the other's body, he had always believed love was sacred, and that the object of his love was never to be defiled. But really, how could he not defile them? When the form of the one he loved ardently, admired, and desired appeared before him, how could he remain unmoved? How could he suppress the fire of lust that ran through his body? You want to talk, this is the realization that romantic orientation and sexual orientation for Mo Run are one and the same. It's obviously not for everybody. Those are two different things, but they often align. Like me, I'm bisexual and biromantic. Both of those things. They just go hand in hand. Having to come to that realization, though, when that's usually portrayed as the standard, is interesting. And obviously makes total sense. But it's really interesting to read, and it's very refreshing to read that coming about in a main character. There were many kinds of love in this world, but romantic love was the kind that could never be pure and clean. It was bound to be stained with hot, sticky sweat and dyed the color of bare skin. Allisexuals, say hello. It was braided with tangled locks of hair and the bitter pungency of photinia blossoms. Ooh, footnote! There haven't been many. This is only the 8th one, and we're over halfway through. Photinia ceratifolia? The Shinon flower. No, is this real? Shinon flower, known to smell like human semen? Is that a thing? Never heard about that in my life. It was clouded with moans and passion. It was a tender, glistening flower that could only bloom in the sultry, damp mud of a warmed bed. Mo Run fled urgently into the night. He came to an abrupt stop, his eyes startlingly bright, his expression dumbfounded. Something seemed to have snapped in his brain. The raging currents he had suppressed with complacency and stupid stubbornness dragged him under with inexorable force, drowning him, swallowing him whole. He stood rooted in horror, lust, desire, love. Chuaning. He finally unearthed that name, cleared away sand and dirt to reveal precious treasure. It had always been Chuaning. This intimate feeling, this blazing love, it had always belonged to Chuaning. We got there! Over 3.5 volumes! But we got there! Hey! This is growth! major turning point for this man. Hey! We are integrating the concepts of love and desire. Love that for you, man. His vision went dark. 2 lifetimes worth of delusion had been shattered, and fragments of brick and tile were swept by violent tides, crashing upon the walls of his heart, making it hard to breathe. He was dumbstruck. Could this have been the truth all along? Had he been wrong about the one he liked all this time, about his so-called love? By the time Mo-Run returned to the bonfire, hugging the jar of pear blossom white, Linger was gone. Of course, no one had noticed the young girl's departure, so no one had known of her conversation with Mo-Run earlier. The crowd still drank in merriment, lively as ever. After 3 rounds, the villagers began to play games. They wove a grass wreath with a rice stalk while someone went up to beat the drums. When the drumming stopped, whoever held the grass wreath would be asked a question they were rule-bound to answer. The farming folks of the lower cultivation realm entertained themselves this way when they had a few moments of idleness. The rules were simple and easy to understand. Even someone like Chu Wanning, who didn't have a single frivolous bone in his body, could easily join in. All right, it's Old Bai's turn. Come on, Old Bai, come draw your lot. Old Bai grabbed a tightly folded sheet of paper from the giant bowl with a look of misery. He opened it and read aloud, "What's better, a woman with large tits or a fat ass?" Ah, the age-old question. The 2 genders. Large tits, fat ass, yeah. The crowd erupted into laughter. Old Bai flushed with anger and waved the slip of paper overhead as he yelled, "Which one of you dumbasses wrote this question? I'll fuck your fucking ancestors." Oh, Old Bai got jokes. Hold on now. One of the villagers laughed and tugged on his shirt. Don't. I can't even read it. It's too funny. Don't go fuck the fucking ancestors yet. First answer the question. Old Bai's wife was sitting next to him, glaring at him with her bullfrog-like eyes until his hair stood on end. He hemmed and hawed, then eventually said in a small voice, "I think they're both pretty good." "Bullshit, you lying liar," someone bellowed, laughing. "You told me just the other day you like 'em thick with childbearing hips. What are you doing lying like this? Drink up. That's the penalty for lying, so drink." Reading Old Bai to filth? I have had Old Bai for what, 2 paragraphs? Hilarious. This poor man. Old Bai could only grimace and drink. The moment he was done, his wife dragged him off by the ear, chewing him out the whole way. Hidden in the crowd, Chu Wanning found himself equally discomfited and intrigued by this game. If these vulgar questions were posed to him, however, he would certainly be unable to answer. Just then, the village chief held up a strip of black cloth about a foot long and said with a grin, "Let's change the drummer. Switch old Jang out so he can play too. Who wants to take over?" Chu Wanning was quick to volunteer. "I'll do it." He walked over to the drum of thick cowhide, took the drumsticks, and settled himself down. The village chief covered his eyes with the strip of cloth, adjusting it carefully. "Too tight?" "No." "Can you see through it?" "No." The village chief smiled. "All right then, Shenjun, go ahead and start beating the drum. Stop whenever you like." Okay. Chu Wanning raised the drumsticks and experimentally tapped the leather surface a couple times. Soon he was nimbly tapping out staccato drum beats, rhythmic and fast-paced. Blindfolded as he was, he couldn't know that Mo-Run was watching him across the bonfire with a gaze full of turmoil and confusion. Yeah, are you kidding? Chu Wanning blindfolded? That's a Sparks flew from the fire-like orange fireflies, scattering into the black night. He gazed at that man whose white robes brushed the ground. Like a sharp blade, his gaze scraped across every inch of Chu Wanning's face, from his forehead to the tip of his nose, his lips, his chin. Chu Wanning held an indescribable allure to Mo-Run. Blindfolded as he was like this. Thank you. This time, Mo-Run did not allow that allure to slip from his grasp. Instead, he chewed it over in his mind, lapped at it in his thoughts. Within it, he found the taste of love. He felt once more the shock in his heart, and he once more verified it. He was not mistaken. He did feel love toward Chu Wanning. It was not the kind of love between master and disciple, and certainly not a love born from mere gratitude. He was simply in love with him, and desired him, and wanted him. Finally he realized that all this time he had loved Chu Wanning. It was love. He couldn't believe how obtuse he'd been, how biased, how foolish, how blind, how dumb husky. He couldn't believe it had taken him this long to come to his senses. He was in love with Chu Wanning. The mound of dirt that had been piled over the grave of his mind finally burst open. Memory after memory that had never made sense, question after question that had gone unanswered, all came rushing up in the wake of this late realized love. But he didn't have a chance to savor it or think it over. The drum ceased its beat with a final dong, its echo lingering in the air. The grass wreath chose this exact moment to land on Mo-Run's knees, and he picked it up in a daze. He looked up just in time to see Chu Wanning's sigh as he pulled the black blindfold aside with one hand. Those phoenix eyes blinked, bright and clear as moonlight, and looked over, pure and guileless, curious as the rest to know where the wreath had landed when the drum stopped. His eyes met Mo-Run's. An awkward silence stretched between them. Few things were more uncomfortable than locking eyes with someone you'd been sneaking peeks at. Their gazes met, both evasive. Can you imagine the villagers around them right now? First, they watch the whole eye glancing around the fire thing, and now these same two fools have landed in this situation during this game? No, these poor villagers. But that didn't last. Chu Wanning noticed with a start the complicated, confused tenderness on Mo-Run's handsome face. A tenderness so starkly and scaldingly visible, leaping across the crowd and the sparks of the bonfire. A tenderness that wasn't concealed in the least. Trying would have been futile. Chu Wanning's phoenix eyes widened imperceptibly. Looks like you're the lucky one, Mo Shenjun. Laughing, the village chief pulled Mo-Run to his feet. Mo-Run hesitated, then put the woven grass wreath on his head according to the rules. His dark eyes were bright, but he felt lost. Crowned with rice stalks, he stole another careful glance at Chu Wanning. That handsome tanned face began to gradually flush red under the firelight. Chu Wanning was startled by his peculiar reaction. His eyes grew wider as he stared at Mo-Run until they were almost round. Under Chu Wanning's naked stare, Mo-Run lowered his gaze, lips pursed and utterly silent, looking obedient and a little bashful. He was acting like a slow-witted youth who had reached the age where love was on the mind and was experiencing his first puppy love, all clumsy and awkward, pathetically yet adorably so. If Chu Wanning had been startled before, he was shocked now. Was he going blind? Why else was he seeing this strapping, red-blooded young man acting like a blushing maiden? Was he possessed? It's the end of that freaking chapter. We're on page 265. For chapter 144, which is called Shizun, I Like You. We're going to take our break here. I try to keep the break to about 10 minutes or less. And we are trying out a new thing with sort of the Gaywatch break room. So allow me a moment to transition to it. You should be able to hear both the sounds of a little bit of fire, a little bit of rain, and you should also be able to hear the lo-fi. I believe I fixed it. If you can't, let me know, and I'll see if I can fix it on the fly, or I'll make a note for how to fix it later. Alrighty? I've also made a couple of tweaks to it, and there are a couple more rainbowy things around there. Alright. I'll be right freaking back for the second half of this freaking stream. We're back. That break did absolutely nothing for my nerves, and yet it was still terribly lovely. I'm really glad that the room worked out and all the sounds and everything for you guys. Just in case you didn't know, but I believe you guys were talking about it in the chat. That program is called Spirit City Lo-Fi Sessions. You can get it on Steam, and it is fantastic for a variety of things. I'm not sponsored in any way, shape, or form. I've just been, as you could see in the actual break room, I'm at level like in the high 200s or something. I have it on all the time. I genuinely use it, and I love it so much. I mainly use it as just like a cozy space to decorate and just, I don't know, have a space available. There's something comforting about that. I do use it for to-do lists every now and then, but genuinely, it's a great group of developers. They do the most that they possibly can, and it is well worth your money if you're looking for a very light sort of productivity type of app. Extremely useful. Could not possibly live without it. We are on page, once again, 265, chapter 144, for a chapter called Shizun, I Like You. And she has proved herself both incredibly trustworthy and incredibly not trustworthy when it comes to her chapter titles. So, I don't know what to think. He just had this realization to himself, so it doesn't immediately strike me that he would just kind of have it again, therefore warranting the chapter title, which would lead you to believe that he might be saying this out loud, but at the same time, it kind of feels like that's what she wants us to think. Kind of very obviously. I don't know, man. She's, you know, mine fucked me, 8 ways from Sunday. So I really don't know what to believe in most instances anymore. And it kind of doesn't feel like it's about to be blurted out loud, which might be really hilarious to the people who have read this before because but it doesn't feel like that's what's about to happen. She said with no confidence whatsoever. Mo-Run plucked a piece of paper from the massive bowl and unfolded it, spreading it flat. If this is stuff that's submitted by villagers... Oh no. Upon seeing its contents, he first let out a breath of relief, then quickly became nervous. What is it? The village chief asked. Mo-Run showed him the paper. The village chief took one look and laughed. Good thing there aren't any girls from Shanjun's sect here, or more Shanjun might have been put in a tricky spot. It's not going to happen publicly. It's not going to happen publicly. Not with these guys. He did not just get a question of who do you want to bang on Seashung Peak. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Come on. No, he didn't. Chu Unning, already deeply curious about the question Mo-Run had picked up, now grew even more so. He stared at that slip of paper as if he was going to burn a hole through it. Mo-Run said, laughing, But take a look. Village chief, this has to be against the rules, right? Everyone else only got one question, but this one's technically asking 3. What can I say? Shanjun got lucky, I guess, the village chief said. If Shanjun isn't happy with it, toss it out and grab a new one. But a new one would probably net something along the lines of, do women with long legs or thin waists look better? Morun smiled and said, "Forget it. Let's stick with this one." He handed the paper back to the village chief and announced, "The question I picked asked me to talk about the 3 people I like the most. It's worse. It's worse. That's so much worse. That's so much worse." Chuaning had no words. "Me either, babe. It's fine." It was just at this time that a red-eyed Linger returned to the group. Afraid the others would it's all right. Afraid the others would see she'd been crying. She didn't squeeze her way to the front, but instead sat on the outskirts of the crowd. Morun didn't notice her. In fact, once Morun had shared what was on his paper, he'd fixed his gaze on the bonfire. It was such a personal question. He felt that he would be smothered by sheer awkwardness if he looked at anybody while answering, so he avoided eye contact altogether. The flickering of the fire reflected in his black eyes, casting his handsome face in light and shadow. He stared at it for a long moment, lost in thought, then eventually began, "I'll start with my mom." This man's about to bare his soul, his childhood trauma, and his queer longings out for all these poor villagers to see. He's going to end this game. There are 2 options. They're either never going to play this game again, or they're going to play this game every single night for the next 100 years. He said, "My mom passed on when I was very young. Honestly, I don't really remember what she looked like. I only remember that when she was around, I always had food to eat and a safe place to sleep. So if I had to name 3 people, she's one of them." The village chief nodded. "She sounds like quite the loving mother. All right, that counts as 1, Shenjin. The second one is my Shiga. He's very kind to me, and while we share no blood bond, he treats me better than a brother by birth." This was an answer Chuaning had expected, so there was scarcely a ripple on his face or in his heart. Morun's affection for Shi Mei was blindingly obvious. Chuaning had heard as much with his own ears back at Jincheng Lake, so he wasn't surprised. He only gazed at that man who shone in the light of the night's fire, chiseled figure firm and powerful, face incredibly handsome, and willfulness lining his bones. A great deal of a person's spirit showed in their eyes, and Morun's bright black eyes were vivacious, like a lamp that would never go out as long as a drop of oil remained. Someone with eyes like these was sure to be incredibly stubborn, and Chuaning was very taken with this kind of stubbornness. Alas, this stubbornness wasn't his for the taking. Morun went on about how great Shi Mei was, but Chuaning heard none of it. Chilled by the night breeze, he poured himself a cup of hot tea, wrapping his hands around it and sipping it slowly. The tea warmed him from the inside out, down his throat, down to his belly, until even his heart felt like it had mellowed. He silently poured himself another cup. Yet as he was about to take another sip, he heard Morun, who had just finished praising Shi Mei, pause for a moment before saying, "There's one more. The third person I want to mention is my Shizun." Chuaning choked on his tea as if his throat had been burned, spluttering and coughing nonstop, his face deeply flushed. So focused was he on wiping up the tea that he never once looked up at Morun. When someone was used to their feelings being insignificant in the eyes of others, being pulled out of the ground and exposed would only make them scared and anxious about the dirt they were covered in. They would only want to dart back into the darkness once more, curling up to hide. But Morun obviously was not planning on giving Chuaning a chance to escape. The man was so closed off. If he had his way, he'd only ever show you his back. He'd never turn to look at you. He appeared fiery and fierce, eyes sharp as blades, filled with the promise of attack, with roaring thunder, but Morun knew it was no more than a carefully crafted mask. And after all, he had seen the gentleness of Chuaning's human soul, so pitiful and helpless within the steaming mist of Mengpo Hall. He didn't want to see Chuaning mistreat himself like that anymore. His Shizun should never have to wear that savage, terrifying mask ever again. If he and that pride of his were unwilling to take it off, then Morun would extend a helping hand. Not much tea had been spilled, yet. And whatever spilled had long since been cleaned up. Yet Chuaning still wiped away at invisible stains. He was used to spinning a cocoon around himself, so he didn't look up. Gradually he realized that it had gone quiet around him. So quiet! So quiet, it was a little queer. A child giggled and said in a loud whisper, "Mom, Chu Xianjun is such a dummy." The mother hastened to cover her thoughtless child's mouth with a hush, but Chu Wanning had heard. Dummy. Yeah, who's the husky now? No, Yu Hong of the Night Sky could not have less resemblance to the word dummy. He was unbridled and sharp, fierce and cold. He was... Shizun, if you wipe any harder, you'll wipe a hole through the table. A pair of black cloth boots approached, drew closer, and encroached into his personal space before they stopped. A shadow stretched over Chu Wanning, its presence bearing down on him with the force of a lofty mountain. So heavy he found it hard to breathe. So heavy it was a little humiliating, and a little enraging from how humiliating it was. He was suddenly furious, vexed by his own unexpected vulnerability. He slapped the handkerchief down and jerked his chin up, full of animosity. Phoenix eyes brimmed with rage as he glared at Mo Run, coiled and ready to attack. In that same second, Mo Run said, full of respect and gentleness, "Shizun, pay attention to me." These poor villagers! These poor people! Meanwhile, I'm towards the back, angling my way through the crowd to get a better angle, but that's just me. This phrase was like a spell, uttered as it was at the precise moment Chu Wanning had looked up. Only Chu Wanning knew it was coincidence that he hadn't raised his head in response to Mo Run's plea for attention. But so what? To Mo Run and the watching crowd, it looked like Chu Wanning had responded promptly to his disciple's request. Promptly. There was nothing more humiliating. He felt like his dignity had been utterly lost. Not yet. Chu Wanning's face was like ice, but his eyes sparked with fire. Yet what he met was only Mo Run's gentle and warm gaze that, like boundless spring water, washed over his sharp-toothed rage and effortlessly engulfed it. "Shizun," Mo Run said. "My third answer is you." Left with nowhere to vent his indignation, Chu Wanning resorted to indifference. He said after a long moment. He was the picture of cool composure, so very calm and dignified, a Chu Zongshe above worldly concerns. Chu Wanning mentally patted himself on the back for his performance. Mo Run watched in amusement. Mo Zongshe thought to himself, could it be that this Chu Zongshe actually was kind of a little dummy? Chu Wanning was completely oblivious to the fact that he'd been slapped with the label of little dummy in his disciple's mind. In his nervousness, he retreated even further behind his cold and haughty demeanor. "Well," he demanded, "did you want something?" The question unwittingly hit the mark, and the smile on Mo Run's face stiffened. Mo Run wanted everything, but he couldn't have anything. So what if he liked Chu Wanning? He'd discovered it too late, when that person was too far out of reach. He'd spent 2 lifetimes chasing after Shi Mei, only to realize that he'd loved the wrong person, that he had to turn around. In truth, it was difficult for him to accept as well. If he had understood his own heart at the time of his rebirth, perhaps it wouldn't have been too late, but this belated discovery only added to his misery. He'd inflicted too many cruel torments onto Chu Wanning's body in the previous life. To him, sex had become something he used to torture the proud, unyielding man beneath him. He saw Chu Wanning as an immortal being, above worldly desires, beyond such things as love or lust. When it came to ruining Chu Wanning, Mo Run knew of countless ways to ravish and plunder, but when it came to treating him well, Mo Run couldn't think of many ways at all. He seemed to have turned really stupid, like he'd suddenly become an idiot. All he could think to do was maintain a proper distance between his Shizun and himself, to place his Shizun on an altar while he prostrated himself on the ground. Enfolded in this third like was a scalding and secret love. But Mo Run couldn't afford to let Chu Wanning notice that. He could only restrain himself and disguise his feelings of adoration as simple affection between master and disciple, which he very respectfully presented to Chu Wanning. And so Mo Run replied, "I just wanted to let Shizun know, that's all." Chu Wanning watched him silently. "It's just," Mo Run added, "I couldn't help but want everyone to know." "Know what?" Mo Run smiled. His black eyes shone with a light so brilliant it concealed the turbulent undercurrents of desire. "To know how lucky I am," he said, still grinning. to have the world's best Shizun. I'm now I've come up and I'm more in the middle of the crowd now, and I'm like elbowing the person next to me. The same superlative 3 times in a row. What a clumsy expression, yet one he'd worked extremely hard on. This was precisely the style of Mo Run's unpolished simplicity. Chu Wanning gazed at him with an unfathomable expression. Only his lashes quivered minutely. Mo Run took a deep breath. He didn't know where his courage was coming from, but he felt that if he missed his chance now, he might never find such boldness in himself again for the rest of his life. He abruptly dropped to one knee, attempting to bring himself level with Chu Wanning where he sat. Unfortunately, with his size and height, Mo Run still towered over his Shizun, even while kneeling. But he couldn't care about that right now. He could only feel how fast his heart was racing and how rapidly his blood was flowing. Shizun. Chu Wanning eyed him, suddenly wary. He saw so much anxiety in Mo Run's eyes that he reflexively leaned back just a little. Yet still the sharp arrow pierced right through his heart. I like you. Chu Wanning had nowhere to run. The deer bounding through the woods had been shot by the hunter and crumpled silently to the ground. Chu Wanning stared at him blankly. A dull droning filled his mind, and he could neither hear nor see. Like. What a reserved, ambiguous word. Unlike love, so nakedly forthright that it would scorch a person's heart, like was a word that could be interpreted interpreted in myriad ways, allowing lovesick men and women everywhere to confess their feelings beneath a veneer of calm, allowing them an outlet for some part of the affection that filled their hearts to bursting. Mo Run thought to himself, I like you, but I don't want to alarm you or force you into anything. You will think I speak of the affection a disciple shows toward his master. It's unfortunate for me, but surely this is the limit of what you'd want from a disciple. Meanwhile, Chu Wanning thought to himself, you say you like me, but it's a liking born of pity, out of obligation to the one who taught you and saved your life. This is not the way I want to be liked. But I've done all I can to garner this affection. I have no strength left, no more bargaining chips to trade for anything more. For you to acknowledge me as your Shizun, to have this form of liking, is enough for me. I won't ask for more. Neither said anything more, and the crowd watching the show praised the deep affection between master and disciple. Just gals being pals, you know? Historians would call them friends. It's whatever. Except for, you know, the person standing next to me around the middle, kind of still working our way towards the front now. Now we're just elbowing each other. Yeah. Only Linger, hidden in her corner, sensed something amiss. The expression on Mo Run's handsome face seemed to conceal some deeply suppressed desire, a desire so ardent it pricked her senses. But she was a naive girl who had grown up in a tiny village. Homosexuality was something she had no inkling of. She couldn't quite pinpoint what felt so off. In this world, there would always be people who were thoughtless and unreserved, bold and domineering, brazenly strutting about with a devil-may-care attitude, just as long as they weren't in love. Once these people fell in love, they became a pan of hot oil on a blazing fire, hearts and eyes aflame. Sorry, that just took me out, because the romance novel that I'm reading in the warm-up stream is literally called Hearts Aflame, and that was a little too close for comfort right there. They would constantly yearn for the desire in their hearts to be discovered by its target, wanting nothing more than to plunge deep into the ocean of passion with them, to be forever entwined. But should the target of their wanting actually learn their truth, these people would then exist in an endless state of trepidation, fearing that the object of their affection didn't return their feelings, afraid that they would be rejected, continuously on edge. Never mind if the devil cared. If a cricket were to chirp once or twice on a tree as it went about its crickety business, these people would take it as an omen, anxiously thinking, oh heavens, the crickets have chirped. Is this a sign he doesn't like me? I mean, it's, you know, I don't see a lie anywhere in here. At its haziest, love was a guessing game, a game of hide and seek. It saturated all the air in a 2-mile radius with its sour stench. Mo Wei-yu had been Titian Jun in the previous life. Now he was Mo Zhongshe. Notorious and infamous back then, renowned and celebrated now. Once the most wicked of devils, he'd since become the most virtuous of men. But still, he'd never been able to escape that stench. As for Chu Wanning, when it came to matters of love, this guy was like a fish caught in a net. The slightest disturbance would have him all tangled up until his head ached in confusion. Even so, he would rather die than lose face, so he would huff and say, "What a sour, rotten business. Nothing worth discussing." A man truly digging his own grave. That's the end of the chapter. And correct, Liv. The overthinking, relatable. The hyper-analysis of your feelings, their feelings, how your feelings relate to their feelings, and how their feelings could potentially relate to yours, and like the hyper-analysis of your motives and their motives and everything back and forth, and how where's that line, and I would never cross it, and that was all of that relatable, deeply relatable. Probably telling on myself, but it's relatable as shit. It is exhausting, isn't it? Yup. Page 275 for chapter 145. Shizun has a mealtime companion now. I believe this is the last chapter for today, for whatever that means. The busy harvest season ended with the turning colors of the leaves. The villagers of Yuliang village prepared an assortment of parcels, large and small, packed full of jerky, rice case, spices, and homespun cloth. They thrust these parcels into Chu Wanning and Mo Run's arms. Xisheng Peak did not lack for food or goods, but these were heartfelt gifts. To reject them would be rude. Thus the two accepted the parcels and helped the village chief fill the saddlebags. Linger was there too, hugging a bamboo basket covered in a porcelain-patterned cloth. A lifted corner revealed fresh steamed flatbreads and a dozen green-shelled hard-boiled eggs. She paused in front of Mo Run's horse, her bright black eyes unable to meet his gaze. She wanted to look at him, but the memory of her tipsy confession of the other night was too mortifying. After some hesitant shuffling, she eventually came over, raising the basket above her head, and said to the handsome man seated astride the horse, "Mo Shenjun, I made these just this morning for you and Chu Shenjun to eat on the road." Mo Run hesitated, unsure of her intentions. He didn't know whether to accept or decline. Linger understood his misgivings. She lifted her head. Despite the blush on her face, there was stubbornness and some hurt in her gaze. She might have tried everything to win the affection of this extraordinary Shenjun, but she wasn't one of those girls with no dignity who would continue clinging on after a clear rejection. "Relax, Shenjun," she said. "Linger doesn't mean anything by it. I just want to thank Shenjun for taking care of Yuliang village these last couple of weeks." And see, this is why Linger is great. Because, like, she is a village girl looking for a rich guy to hitch her wagon to and get the heck out of this town. Which, you know, given her situation, completely understandable. Is it, like, technically the purest intentions for wanting to, like, fall in love? No, but purest intentions regarding marriage was not conducive to women of that era, right? And plus, like, she gets it, man. She's not, like, a shit person. She's not solely, like, gold digger. It's not, you know, money or everything. You know, there are certain things that she wants, but she's also, you know, not a completely, like, she's not scheming, conniving or anything. There's still a lot of genuineness with her. We like her. We like Linger. Only then did Mo Run take the basket. From his seat atop his horse, he looked down and replied sincerely, "Many thanks, miss. Shenjun is most welcome." When he saw that she was sensible about things, he felt more friendly toward her. After a pause, he asked, "Do you have any plans for the future, miss?" "Why does Shenjun ask?" "I just think you don't seem like a girl who wants to live in a small village for long." Linger smiled, the fight coming back to her eyes. "I want to visit the upper cultivation realm. I hear Rufeng Sek's leader is kind and willing to lend a hand to ambitious people of little means. As long as those of us from the lower cultivation realm can find work in Linyi, they won't chase us off. My needlework is decent, and I also know how to cook. I should be able to get by." Of course, she didn't say the most important part out loud. Out of the 10 great sects, Rufeng Sect had the most disciples, and its domain stretched across a vast territory, totaling 72 cities of varying size. Moreover, Linyi was well known as a cultivator's hub. Out of 10 people on its streets, 5 would be cultivators. But Chu Wanning hadn't guessed her intentions. When he heard she was headed to Lin Yi, his brows knitted slightly. Things at Rufeng aren't as simple as you might think. If Miss only wants to settle in the upper cultivation realm, perhaps consider Yangzhou's Rainbow Isle instead. It's impossible to make a living in Yangzhou. Everything is too expensive, Linger said. Xianjun's advice is appreciated, but Linger has already thought it over. She'd made her stance clear. Chu Wanning knew it would be futile to press, so he let it go. The two set off on their horses with their saddlebags stuffed to bursting. As they passed by Butterfly Town, Chu Wanning took a close look at the barrier there. Fortunately, the spiritual current was plentiful, and everything remained stable. They continued riding and were back at Xisheng Peak by noon. Chu Wanning went off to brief Shui Zhengyong on how things had gone. Mo Run, left at loose ends, strolled about idly. As he neared Naiha Bridge, he encountered someone scrubbing the stone lions on the bridge's columns. Who had been punished with manual labor? Not wishing to embarrass the offender, Mo Run decided to take another route. Yet just as he was turning around, he heard a familiar voice call out across the distance. Run! Upon closer inspection, the one scrubbing the lions was Shi Mei! Mo Run was momentarily taken aback, feeling somewhat strange. For one, it was odd to find someone as rule-abiding as Shi Mei getting punished. For another, there was Shi Mei's current appearance. Even though it had been some time since Mo Run had been introduced to this fully grown version of Shi Mei, he hadn't gotten used to it. Instead, Mo Run found Shi Mei's face and figure increasingly unfamiliar as time went on. He almost hadn't recognized him at first glance just now. What are you doing here? You got in trouble? Mo Run asked as he walked over. Shi Mei looked a little abashed. Together with the young master. What is happening? Meng Meng? Mo Run paused for a moment, then chuckled. That would explain it. It was true that Shui Meng was always getting himself into trouble. What did he drag you into this time? He said he wanted to go to the Forbidden Grounds in the mountain's backwoods to catch a few monsters for training. Mo Run's eyebrows rose. He ended up almost stabbing apart the crack in the barrier Shizun sealed before he left. Mo Run didn't know if he should laugh or cry. Hey! Heaven Official's Blessing fans! Take a shot. Does he think monsters are something he can catch and keep, like cats and dogs? And you, don't just play along with him when he's messing around. Why didn't you try to talk him out of it? Shi Mei sighed in exasperation. Of course I tried to talk him out of it. It was no use. I was afraid it'd be dangerous, so I had to go with him. Never mind, forget it. At least nothing really terrible happened. What about you, Aran? You and Shizun went to Yuliang Village to help with the harvest a while back, right? How was it? Everything go smoothly? Yeah, not too bad. The two made small talk for a time. After bidding farewell to Shi Mei, Mo Run walked alone down a small, tree-lined path in silence. With his newfound clarity, he could see in hindsight that his feelings toward Shi Mei had been more of an obsession, something he held on to out of habit, and not the love he'd thought. Shi Mei on a pedestal, way up there. Most definitely. He'd once believed that because he looked at Shi Mei and thought him beautiful, thought him divinely ethereal, and thought his presence comforting, that this was desire. But it was not. Chu Wanning and Mo Run, each, just by virtue of their existence, teaching the other about sexual desire and desire in general, kind of amazing. Really in love with that. People had always appreciated beautiful things. Mo Run appreciated Shi Mei's beauty, but a closer examination revealed that this appreciation carried no intimate desire. Mo Run enjoyed looking at Shi Mei the same way he enjoyed looking at the mountains cloaked with red leaves in the autumn and ponds crowded with lotus blossoms in the summer. But in all these years, he'd basically never had any inappropriate thoughts. He still cherished Shi Mei and cared for him as before, yet it was not the same. Mo Run finally understood what love was. He was no virtuous ascetic. His love was hot and steamy, accompanied by the urge to conquer, by the slap of flesh against flesh, by the rushing of blood and the spilling of fluids. He was a wolf that could appreciate the scent of wild roses, but wolves had fangs and tastes to match. What he fed on was not grass or flowers, but blood and flesh. The way she describes sexual desire really brings the carnal out in carnal desires. She really puts the carnal in carnal desires. Yeah. Yeah, and it's just terribly good. It's just good. She's really good. I don't know if you guys know this. She's really good. That was a scene break. By dinner time, Shui Meng had finally finished organizing the books in the second classics section of the library. He whined in exhaustion, sprawling over the table at Mengpo Hall as he issued a steady stream of complaints. Even his usual favorite, deep-fried diced chicken with chili peppers, couldn't cheer him up. As he played listlessly with his chopsticks, he spied Chu Wanning entering the dining hall. The sight finally gave him the energy to straighten up and call out, "Shizun!" Chu Wanning looked over and nodded. Mo Run sat beside Shui Meng. He, Shui Meng, and Shi Mei had always eaten as a trio. But today, when Chu Wanning walked in, Mo Run set about shifting all the plates and bowls around to make space at their table. "What are you doing?" Shui Meng asked. Mo Run threw Shui Meng, that was right, a grin. He stood and waved to Chu Wanning. "Shizun, come sit here." Shui Meng and Shi Mei gaped at him. They respected their Shizun, certainly, but sharing a meal with him was another matter altogether. To eat with someone regularly required a certain level of familiarity and comfort, if only so one could tolerate the sounds their dining partner emitted as they crunched on bones and smacked their lips, could ignore the ugly faces they made while eating or any slips in table manners. Judging by the expressions on Shui Meng and Shi Mei's faces, it was plain that, though Chu Wanning's own etiquette was impeccable, they were not used to eating with him, and they didn't want to eat with him. To them, the occasional meal together with their Shizun was an obligatory social nicety wherein both parties had to be on their best behavior. After those meals, their backs would often be stiff from tension, and they wouldn't have tasted a bite of what they ate. Chu Wanning understood this as well. He looked in surprise at Mo Run, then shook his head and made straight for his usual spot, carrying some simple vegetable dishes. He hadn't taken a meal in Mengpo Hall in 5 years. As Chu Wanning took his seat, he noticed a small, ornamental copper plate nailed into the corner of the table. On it were engraved the words, "Reserved for Yuheng Elder." He stared at it for a long, silent moment. What was wrong with Shui Jingyang? Shui Jingyang's a sweetheart, that's what's wrong. He sat gloomily, setting his wooden tray down with a heavy rattle. Yet before he could take a bite, someone pulled back the wooden chair across from him, claiming a seat at the table reserved for Yuheng Elder. He placed his own tray right next to Chu Wanning's, pressed very close, almost touching. Chu Wanning looked up at length and said, "What are you doing here?" "It's too cramped over there," Mo Run said, grinning happily as he picked up his rice bowl, "so I've come to eat with Shizun." Chu Wanning glanced at where Shui Meng and Shi Mei sat, baffled. In what world was it cramped? Oh, honey. The two deserted by Mo Run It's fine. I'm fine. The two, deserted by Mo Run, wore similarly puzzled expressions as they peeked over at Chu Wanning and Mo Run's table. Shi Mei stared wordlessly. Shui Meng mumbled, "Is that mutt out of his mind?" Mo Run had more pressing concerns. He'd stolen a glimpse at the dishes Chu Wanning had picked earlier and had left him all twitchy. Chu Wanning was a picky eater, and particularly fussy about what he would and wouldn't touch. It was always this thing would upset his stomach or that thing tasted gross. Mo Run couldn't imagine it was healthy. The nutritional imbalance was bound to become an issue once Chu Wanning got older. In the past, he couldn't have cared less about what Chu Wanning ate. But things were different now. Aside from the fact that he liked Chu Wanning, Mo Run was also his disciple. It was his duty to see that his Shizun ate properly. But getting Chu Wanning to eat was an art in itself. In much the same way one couldn't shove food into a cat's mouth and expect them to eat it, brute force wouldn't work on this man if he had an aversion to something. An idea came to Mo Run. He plucked up a piece of braised pork, neither too fat nor too lean, and placed it in Chu Wanning's bowl. "Shizun, try this." Just as expected, Chu Wanning frowned. "I don't like pork belly," he said. "Take it away." Mo Run had prepared his strategy in advance. He said, smiling, "I hear it's done sweet Jiangnan style." "The way they cook meat in Jiangnan isn't like this," Chu Wanning said. "How would you know if you don't try it?" "I can tell from looking at it." Peak cat behavior. "But the cook said it's Jiangnan style." Mo Run set the trap, waiting for the cat to wander in. He said, still smiling, "Mengpo Hall's cook is an experienced veteran. How can he be wrong? It must be that Shizun's been away from home for so long you forgot what braised pork from your hometown looks like." Absurd, Chuan countered. How could I possibly forget? Mo-Run ate a piece, making a show of carefully tasting it, then said earnestly, I really think it's Shizun who's wrong. This meat is so sweet. Try a piece if you don't believe me. Chuan was utterly oblivious to Mo-Run's ulterior motive. Unconvinced, he picked up the braised pork and put it in his mouth. What do you think? Mo-Run held back his laughter as he watched this big white cat take the bait. Chuan frowned in earnest consideration. It's not right. The taste of star anise is too strong. I'm going to go tell the cook. This isn't how you make Jiangnan's braised pork. Wait. Mo-Run hurriedly stopped him with a tug, feeling a little speechless. He hadn't thought this guy would take it so seriously. If Chuan confronted the cook, wouldn't Mo-Run be exposed? Don't be hasty, Shizun. The cook must be busy right now. If Shizun says it's not right, then it definitely isn't. I'll let him know later. Let's just finish our meals first. Thinking this reasonable, Chuan sat back down and returned to his meal. The crafty Mo-Run moved to the next step of his dastardly plan. This time he picked up a piece of fish. Chuan's chopsticks faltered. Shad fish? I don't want it. Take it away. Why not? Don't like it. Mo-Run grinned. Because it has too many bones? A long pause, then... No. But whenever Shizun eats fish, it's always the ones without bones, or ones with larger bones that are easy to pick out. There's no way Shizun won't eat shad because it's a small fish with lots of bones, right? Mo-Run laughed. He was all too familiar with Chuan's soft spots and knew just how to poke them. Sure enough, Chuan was fooled again. Irked, he said, How ridiculous. Then he picked up the piece of shad Mo-Run had placed in his bowl and ate it, clearly demonstrating that he certainly could eat fish with lots of bones. Just like that, Chuan was unwittingly coaxed by Mo-Run into eating far more variety than usual, with meat and greens from almost every dish. What would have been a quick meal dragged on for almost an hour, and still they weren't done. By the time they returned their dishes and left, Shi Mei and Shi Mei were long gone, and only a handful of disciples remained inside Mengpo Hall. Married. Mo-Run walked Chuan back to the Red Lotus Pavilion. The sun slowly sank below the horizon as they walked the tree-lined path, twilight spreading across the skies. The night breeze blew, and Mo-Run strolled languidly with his hands clasped behind his head. All of a sudden, he smiled and said, Shizun, what do you want? Nothing. I just wanted to call out to you. Oh my god. You hang up first. No, you hang up. That's where we're at. Chuan eyed him. Are you so stuffed with food that all the nonsense is coming out of you? Mo-Run's smile grew soft. Yep, totally stuffed. So Shizun, can I keep eating with you in the future? Chuan knew Mo-Run didn't mean anything by it, but his heart couldn't help but skip a couple beats. Fortunately, his gaze remained steady. Why? Are you fighting with Shi Mei? No, that's not it. Mo-Run waved the notion aside with a laugh. It's just that I haven't eaten in their company for so long. It's been 5 whole years. Sitting together again feels a little awkward. But if Shizun thinks I'll get in the way, I'll find another place to eat by myself tomorrow. It's fine. Chuan didn't immediately reply. Of course, Mo-Run couldn't say, I feel bad for you always eating alone, and neither could he say, I want to make sure you eat well. Mo-Run didn't have to try to know neither approach would work. What he could do was feign vulnerability, confess how pitifully lonely he was, and say that he really wanted company. Chuan had ever been kind-hearted. He definitely wouldn't deny him. Mo-Run could see the resolve crumbling in Chuan's eyes. All he needed was one last push. But honestly, I really don't want to eat alone. Why's that? Mo-Run lowered his soft lashes. His small smile was half genuine emotion, half playing it up to get Chuan on the hook. Shizun, someone who eats by themselves is simply satisfying hunger, don't you think? He paused for a moment, and in the splendid red glow of dusk, brushed aside the loose strands of hair blown against his forehead by the breeze. His dimples were deep as he gazed intently at the other man. Sorry, I'm choking on the... Woo! When two people share both food and company, that's when you really taste the food and feel its warmth. That's called eating a meal. Chuan watched him silently. Shizun, can I still eat with you tomorrow? There was no defense against the little wolf pup when he made an effort to be sincere. Mo-Run had a stubbornness about him that stirred the heart as he said, Shizun, I spent 5 years all alone out there. Now that you're awake, I'll always eat with you. It'd feel weird without you, and I promise I won't eat rabbits' heads or duck necks. A puff of laughter escaped toward the end, and he shamelessly tugged at Chu-Wan-Ning's sleeve. I'll eat tofu with scallion and sweet osmanthus lotus roots with you. So say yes, pretty please. Oh, man. We have wide eyes. We're fluttering our eyelashes. We're cozying up to him. Oh, we are sweet-talking him within an inch of his demisexual life. Holy shit. Mo-Run had actually been doing quite well up to that point, but with this, he accidentally reminded Chu-Wan-Ning of an unsettled score. A menacing expression settled over his face as he chuckled coldly. Fine by me, but you have to eat exactly what I do in the mornings. Sure, Mo-Run agreed before he'd fully processed Chu-Wan-Ning's words. Wait, what do you eat in the morning? Savory tofu pudding, Chu-Wan-Ning replied cruelly, with seaweed. Mo-Run blinked, flabbergasted. Was Chu-Wan-Ning seriously bringing up ancient grudges from the time they had hot pot together when he was Shiasini? Chu-Wan-Ning ground out through clenched teeth. And dried shrimp. This is why these bitches are married. I cannot imagine... That's the end of the chapter. I cannot imagine anything more married than that. Really can't. I don't think anything exists. We're on page 287, chapter 146, which is called Shizun, Is She Really Getting Married? Is she really getting married? Why do I feel like it's, Chutong? Why do I feel like it's her? It could be Linger. But I don't know. I feel like it's Chutong somehow. Because she's just with... Unless I'm misremembering the rules in Chutong's situation? Let me see real quick. Since we're 49. It's 10 pages. No, we'll probably... This is a good ending point, actually. This is a pretty good stopping point for the day. Once again, page 287 for chapter 146. And that is where we will pick up on Thursday. Same time as per usual, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard. Where we get to, I guess, move into the next phase, I suppose. It's like we're done with the farming section. I don't know if it's its own arc, if it's considered its own arc. Because obviously I can't look at what the arcs are. But it's like we finished that, so now we get to transition into something else. And where are we? We're over halfway through. We're actually kind of getting into the last stretch. This has about... Yeah, we're getting towards the last 100 pages of volume 4. And so that, to me, would be enough time to really set up whatever next phase or thing we're going into. A bit of a transitional section, potentially. I kind of don't know. We're in glorious territory now that we're on the other side of the barrier and all of that. It's one of those things that in the moment it kind of feels like anyone's guess, but in hindsight, after I've read it all, I'll be like, oh, well, of course we had to do this next. And it'll all just seem very plainly obvious. But I don't really know. I don't really know where we could go after this. But I'm really curious to see where. And of course now, with this whole brand new context of everything that was realized in the farming arc, now we get to go forward with that underpinning all of the actual like plot elements and everything. And of course we still don't know who the fuck the fake Go Chen is, or the person or the other person who was reborn, or if they're one and the same, which I think they probably are. We know that, right? Or am I just hallucinating at the moment? Oh, but I'm terribly excited. I could not be more excited. And yes, I do actually watch my Tumblr often. I'm on Tumblr all the time. Whether or not I can answer, like, asks right away kind of depends. But I have resolved this year to do much better about keeping it all answered and, like, up to date. Because I had a backlog, like, Jesus, you would not believe. But yes, I'm on Tumblr all the time. Gaywatch has a Tumblr. And I live blog over there, actually. I just live blogged 911 and Lucifer over there. And I also I started live blogging Yellow Jackets because we're in season 3. And I've been on Tumblr for an obscenely long time at this point. I actually joined Tumblr. No, it was the same year I got into queer fandom. So 2009. I've been on Tumblr for a hot second. Oh my God, you drew something for me? No, yeah. Send it to me in a message or something. Yeah. And then, I mean, especially if it's Erha related, because, like, I can't go hunting for Erha related fan art, obviously. But you guys, having known what I've seen up until this point, know what you can send me. This is really handy in the Discord, in the Gaywatch Discord. But yeah, if you ever want to send me some non-spoilery stuff I've already seen, I'm very open to this. I'm extremely, extremely open to this. Oh, so, all right. Okay. That farming arc was a lot. That was so much. It wasn't exactly too much, because I loved every single moment of it. But it was so much. And I loved it. I never would have said that, like, the farming arc, what a banger, so good. Never thought I would say that. Because I don't usually go in for arcs like that. I don't know, on a farm doesn't typically... I don't know, transitioning into a farm, especially in a series like this, I was like, I'm not sure where this is going, and essentially kind of why this is going to be worth so much of our time. But then, of course, because Meat Bun is a good writer, she makes it more than worth your time. And how could the farming arc not be a fave? It's got to be a fan favorite, right? Right? It has to be. So yeah, not that I don't compliment this bitch all the time, but even more compliments to Meat Bun for almost essentially kind of shifting genres, sort of. It's obviously all still danmei, but, like, I guess tonal shift. A massive tonal shift for an extended period of time, and pulled off really, really beautifully. And now just makes the whole thing even more lived in, and just feels very real. Because we're not just going through the shit with them all the time. Now we've had a little bit of a moment of peace before we are, I'm sure, inevitably thrown back into the meat grinder. But instead of it being like, oh, a chapter is all the break you get, or a couple of chapters, she decided to really commit to an overall shift for a very long time, to tremendous effect. She's a little freakish, I won't lie. She's got some stuff going on that's a little absurd. She's a little absurd. I greatly dislike her. So much so that I'll be back in a couple of days to read more. Because actually, we should finish this in the next 2-3 streams. So we should be finishing this volume by not this Thursday, but next Thursday, if my numbers hold out. Oh shit. And then we get to go into volume 5 immediately. There won't be any break. Oh damn. All right. Well then, I hope you're having a lovely start to your week. I hope you continue to have a lovely week. And I will see you on Thursday for more of volume 4 of Erha. Please take care of yourselves. Embrace the growth that Mo Run has embraced very recently. And I will see you in a couple days. Thank you so much for tuning in. I never remember to say this. Give it a like, give it a comment to help out the channel and encourage like the stream and the almighty algorithm and all that jazz. You know what to do, and I'll see you in a couple of days, all right?